There we go. So welcome back to the program officially and to the YouTube. Let me get the screen share going this time for just the whole screen, since I'm going to toggle back and forth across stuff. And there we go. Everybody see that okay? Still see me and hear me? Okay, cool. Thank you very much. So I've got my lovely purple website here, yellow and purple. Hide floating meeting controls. There we go. So as you're probably aware, all of my classes have different colors. And there's usually a reason for that. I picked yellow for longitudinal because I end up with this whole model for the means is in red and model for the variance is in blue, and yellow shows both. And when I teach the SEM class, I have that in purple because the distinction between model for the means and variance is a little blurry in that class. And because this class is going to combine the best of both of those, I decided on yellow with purple accent. So there's the background. Here is our course website. It has the usual structure. Everything is going to be on this page. The only materials that will be an icon are the readings. They are available under files in one big zip folder, so you can just download one thing and you'll have all the readings that are currently planned for this semester. Let's see. This class is Tuesday, Thursdays, 12:30 to 1:45. Office hours for me are going to be Mondays and Wednesdays, 3 to 4:30. I do not have a TA. So you're stuck with me in this case, unless you want to reach out to peers and beg for their assistance on a voluntary basis. Let's see here. Materials for this week are up, so you can grab those things as well. To keep myself from rambling too much, I decided to go ahead and make a PowerPoint so that we can walk through the course requirements and talk about what to expect. So this class is going to build on the one that you just finished, 6271, the beginning part of longitudinal models as taught from a multi-level modeling perspective. So some things are going to be the same. Units can still be anything. So that's why I was asking, are we measuring people repeatedly, businesses repeatedly, emergency rooms repeatedly? It can be anything that is measured repeatedly. Repeated can be any length of time. So it could be when the infant is 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, or the infant is 2 months, 4 months, 6 months. Or it could be literally in milliseconds, like if you're watching changes in heart rate in the NICU, whatever level of precision that is measured to could be considered longitudinal data. It all depends on the context of the study, what's most meaningful. Outcomes, we were looking at only observed outcomes last semester, which presumes that they're measured perfectly. Now we know that's not going to be the case, and so one of the things that we'll get into this semester is how to fit latent variable measurement models simultaneously and see how latent variables change over time. I have at least one example of that, and that would be an excellent project topic for those of you who are interested in building your measurement skills as well. So I'm still focused on trying to make this as least difficult as possible. I'm not going to use the word easy because I don't think that's fair, but least difficult. And also trying to focus on mastery. So everything that you do, you'll get a chance to redo. So there's nothing in here that you need to be afraid of. The website is linked here. I only have 5 units planned in this class, so we will have a combination of lecture and examples, 1 or more in most cases. The last couple weeks are still to be determined because I'm not sure how long the projects are going to take based on how many there's going to be. As usual, the lecture slides give you sort of the why and the motivation. The examples are going to give you the how using annotated syntax and output, emphasizing Stata, R, and M+ this semester. So one of the things that I would like you to do within the next couple weeks is to log into the virtual desktop from the University of Iowa and see if M+ is listed for your account as something you have access to. I put in the request last week and I haven't heard back. We won't need to actually use M+ for several weeks, but I want to make sure you have access to it as well. And as folks have been complaining on the evaluations about how jam-packed my slides were, yes, I know, but that's a choice. One of the things that you can do if you prefer more white space to take notes in is to reprint the PDF into portrait mode. That way, like the slide is this much and then there's all the white space around it. That would give you more room to write things down. You could also back convert the slides into PowerPoint and then print a notes page or however you want to do it. So I just want to make folks aware that there are choices in terms of the formatting if you don't prefer the jam-packed slides that I typically have. So as usual, late work is accepted at any point in the semester with some penalties as noted on the syllabus. So we'll talk about those when we get to each of the things. The homework deadlines and all the deadlines right now may be pushed later if we get behind, but they will never be sooner. So what's marked on the syllabus is at least the soonest that something will be asked of you. In terms of what I've planned this time, so 5 formative assessments. They're worth 3 points each because I plan to make them a little bit more involved. So as usual, these are going to be top of the head kinds of questions, so concepts, definitions, some story problems, and then also some use of AI. So one of the things I did in the last time I taught this course, which was the first time, was ask ChatGPT and Google Bard to tell me about various aspects of longitudinal modeling, print out the responses, and have the students correct it as a homework. Say, what did it get right? What did it get wrong? Because what I've learned about AI is that if you don't know very much about something, it sounds plausible. But the more you know, the less right it seems to be. So I plan on doing a couple of those within the formative assessments. Here's ChatGPT's answer to this question. Now you can evaluate it and see if you agree and what you would change if so. So I'm interested to see within 2 years how the accuracy of those responses has changed. So I plan on doing that. We will go over the answers in class. In most cases, there's not going to be a solution or an answer key because I'm looking for your words, your ideas, your interpretations, which means there's not necessarily a single correct answer that I would want you to take with you. 3 points for doing it at all. So if you make an honest attempt, and I usually don't provide detailed feedback because I know we're going to go over it in class, I will give you the 3 points. It is also a chance for you to mention things that you're not sure about. So I want to, this time, have more open-ended prompts as to, are there things you want to go back over, so that you can list those and we can make a point to make sure that we're all on the same page. And if you find yourself trying to answer these questions using AI, please don't. I can tell. And it's not going to make me happy, and it defeats the purpose. I read a great analogy online about this use the other day. It's like, you can probably trick your Fitbit or your Apple Watch into thinking that you got your 10,000 steps, right? Like you could put it on a treadmill or some other thing that's going to rattle it. That doesn't mean you've improved your health. So I think of it that way. It's like, if you find yourself going to those links to answer a question, just write down what you know or what you're confused by, and we'll go from there. Because the point of these is not to get it right. The point of these is for me to figure out where the problems might be and address them before you're having to implement these ideas in a homework or a project. Does that seem fair? So no penalty for being honest and saying, yeah, I don't understand this, but here's what I do understand, and here's what I'd like to talk about. The first homework that you're going to do is up already. It is going to be due in about 2 weeks. It is a written homework. And the idea of this is to answer 10 questions about things we covered last semester. And I want to have you do these in your own words as much as possible. The idea is that you start from a first draft, sort of a brain dump. What do you know on your own? You can go to the book, go to the resources, and fill in the blanks. I'm calling this an effort draft, and you will get 5 points, a half a point per question for answering this. I'm going to collect them, make sure everybody did it, not offer feedback, but then we're going to have an entire class session and maybe 2 dedicated to talking about the answers. So then based on that session, and I will record it so you can go back and refer to whatever as much as needed. Based on that session, then you will submit a second draft, which I'm calling an accuracy draft, that will be graded for real. And so then you can earn up to 10 more points for that. So folks last year liked this assignment. Nobody likes writing per se, but they liked having to go back and force themselves to think about things. And so if everything that we talked about last semester is not crystal clear and accessible at the top of your head right now, this is your chance to try and push it back up to the surface so that you can have access to it. So if you're curious about what that looks like, you can download those questions now. I have indicated in the textbook which chapters go with which questions as well, so that should help you try to orient where information should be coming from. So any questions thus far? We're good? We're still awake? I know we're in the after lunch slump.
I have a question.
Please.
So for the data you mentioned, like when do you think we should be when do you think we should have the data ready for the assignment? Like
For the project, you mean?
Yeah.
Let me see. Ideally, by about week 3 or 4, I'd like you to know whether you plan on working by yourself or with a partner. and then I can help try to play matchmaker if folks are looking for partners and they don't have one at the top of their head. The outline for the class is due March 10th. So you would need to know what access you're going to have and be able to like know what your variables are, how often they're measured, all that kind of stuff by then. And then the projects are going to start probably the week of the 17th of April. So they're not end of the semester projects, they're April projects on purpose. So you have some time to figure that out is the short answer.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, any questions on this stuff though? Because that's where the next thing I'm going to talk about. Okay. Then, so this may be good news or bad news depending on how you feel. You're only doing 2 canned data assignments this semester. Red and green boxes. Only 2. Not 6, not 4, not 5. So those are going to be on models that lend themselves to the same software that you're already familiar with, Stata Mixed, Elmer and R, or Mixed in SAS. And so that's going to be 2 or 3. Those will be the first couple of activities throughout the semester. They're based on the same idea of simulating data using each of your IDs as a random seed with a common story. So each will have your own set of correct answers to work with. You'll get immediate feedback on computational answers. The results questions will be given feedback after the deadline has passed. And then the big project. So if 34 points in total towards this project. The idea is for you to demonstrate what you've learned and hopefully apply it to data that you care about. So in terms of the breakdown, you'll submit an outline, and that will be a chance for you to articulate your data source, your variables, your questions. I will help you try to figure out what your models should look like, or at least say it will look like, example 4, or look like example 5, something along those lines. If the information you submit is not complete enough for me to be able to help you, then I will ask you to revise it so that we can make sure that we're on the same page as to what your plan is. The presentation itself will be somewhere around, I think, 15 to 17 minutes, depending on how it shakes out. It will be a conference style presentation. There is no paper. Okay, so this is a project that is a conference presentation, not a written submission. The reason for that is because I think that the effort that you will put into running the analyses and figuring out how to present them, that effort is really valuable. But if something goes awry and you write a paper about it, then that paper really can't be used and it's not a good use of your time. So my hope for you is that this would be the jumping off point for a real conference presentation or a paper or a project of some greater length. But this is just a starter phase for that. Presentations will be recorded. Did I say that here? I think I have all the notes in here. Yeah, I'm going out of order, but it's off the top of my head. Presentations are going to be recorded because each of you is also going to be responsible for a peer review of someone else's presentation. So that will be another 5 points for that. However, I'm not putting you on YouTube, okay? I promise. My plan is to host the recording access in Icon so that only this class has access to the links of the presentations. And if you're somebody who never ever wants to hear yourself talk, welcome to the club. You don't have to watch your own presentation, but for the benefit of the person who is doing your peer review, I thought they might want to refer back to it. And honestly, it's not quite as painful as it might otherwise be. Let's see here. So that's a big chunk of your grade. My requirement is that it needs to be longitudinal. So by that, something is measured repeatedly more than 2 times. If it's purely clustered multi-level modeling, that's not going to work because we're not talking about that. Repeated measures of other kinds we can talk about. I just want to make sure that whatever content that we have lends itself to what you want to do so that it's fair for you in terms of what's being asked of you. If your models need to cover extensions that we're not going to talk about, so for instance, I had students last semester who were analyzing longitudinal data on students, but the students were nested in different schools. Well, that needs to be a 3-level model instead. And because that student had already had clustered multi-level modeling, was familiar with those concepts, they were able to put the 2 together and make it work. So I would allow that in that case. Similarly, if you have categorical outcomes instead of continuous outcomes, we're not going to get a chance to talk about that this semester, but if you've had IRT, IFA, those kinds of class materials before, then putting those together is something that you should be able to do, and I can help with that as well. So please talk to me if you're not sure what your idea is going to work. We'll figure out some way to try and make it work. It does need to extend beyond the models we covered last semester. So we only got to time invariant predictors, which is not very far. The first thing we're going to do this semester in terms of new material is time varying, which is a whole thing. Like that is essentially the rest of the semester because it's that complicated. I strongly prefer that you use data that you care about. Erica, I'm still talking to you as well. There is a real learning that happens when the numbers matter to you. That's the only way I can say that. And the comments on the evaluations from last time really echoed that. Like everyone said, I learned so much from doing this project. I feel like I can actually do research using these methods. It's great. That's what I want from you. And that magic can't happen if you're talking about, golf scores or preschools or any of the other things that I've put into my assignments that are, fake situations. That being said, if you can't find data that are meaningful to you, then public use data on some topic that you're least interested in is, I think, a good second choice. You can work by yourself or you can work in pairs. You can decide that amongst yourselves, and I can try to help matchmake, as I said. About week 3 or 4-ish, I'd like to have that figured out so that I can figure out how many classes need to be allocated to the presentations. They do need to happen in person, and in the process of collecting your outlines, I will also collect information about when you're available. So I know April is conference season. Several of you are probably going to be going to AERA or NCME. Some of you have reached out to me about other conferences. You can put those dates down and we'll work around it as best we can. Last year we were able to make it work, or last time I should say, so I'm optimistic we can do the same thing as well. The reason the presentations are in April as opposed to at the end of the semester is because I am offering a revision. So if it doesn't go well, you can give your presentation again to your basement in a recording, and I will listen back to it as a revision to the presentation. So it's not like over and done with if it doesn't go well. I know that getting up and talking in front of people is scary. Can I get an amen for that? Anyone love to stand in front of a crowd and talk? A few people maybe, but I know it's a little intimidating, and I understand that. So this will be a safe space. We'll all support each other, but if it doesn't go well, you're not going to fail. You can just redo it and it'll be okay. Yeah, I think I said all the things. So, any questions about any of that or concerns? Can I get a thumb check? Where thumbs up is excited and thumbs down is terrified. How are we feeling about this? Okay, some up, some a little sideways. I'm hoping for like better than, this, but we'll see. Okay. It's only the first week. It's too soon to scare anybody away. Yeah, there. I did say all the things. Got it. So my job this semester otherwise is to answer your questions. And it's only me this time, as we said, there's no TAs. So preferably during class, that way everybody can hear the questions and the answers. Via email is also fine. As I noted in my announcement, my email system is under revision. It's a long and convoluted story, but over break, my account kept getting hacked, and the university's solution to it was to downgrade a bunch of my permissions. And that made it so I could no longer do email in the way that I have been doing it for the past 20 years or so. So I've adopted a new system and there's been some hiccups. Odds are good you are going to get a reply from my Gmail address at some point. It's already happened for the other class. And if that happens, you can reply to that or my Iowa email. They both go to the same inbox. It's the sending part that is a little bit tricky. So email is still hopefully working for me. If you want to talk to me individually in a meeting, that is fine. It will likely be over Zoom, but I have fairly broad availability on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Office hours, Mondays and Wednesdays in the usual format, first come, first serve. You don't need an appointment, just show up and we'll try to help as many folks as we can. Your job is to review on your own, so try to make sure that you're following the concepts, the logic, the definitions, terminology, all that good stuff. Don't wait until the last minute to start something, and don't be afraid to ask for help. I am always here to help you. If you're sending for at least the CanData ones, or if you're looking at M+, it's helpful for me to see screenshots of your error messages rather than the original files, because then I can respond on my phone or wherever I am a little more readily than having to download a file, open it, see what the problem is. In the CanData ones, I will always give you the source files for the example. That's where you can start from. So you can find what's relevant, copy it, modify it, and use it for your purpose. Find and replace is still your best friend. The readings. So I wanted to say a little bit about this. I don't normally do much with the readings, right? I don't ask questions about them. I don't require them per se because I don't really teach from something that is one common source. I went through the list of readings I had last time and I cut it down by at least a third. And then I added a few things that I've been working on over the past few years. So you may look at the reading list and be like, hey, this is like the Lisa reading list. Like about 40% of the papers are things I wrote. Now, that may seem egotistical to put them on your reading list, except for the fact that you are the reason I wrote them. I am a fully promoted tenured professor. Like, I don't have to jump through hoops as much anymore if I don't want to. And honestly, writing psych methods papers and ones on new research are things that are tougher to get through and are more argumentative, I've found. And the things that I like writing and the things that I tend to be better at are explanatory materials. Not really tutorials, but just trying to explain how stuff works and how to think about it. And all of the things that I've added to your reading list are things I wrote because I thought there should be a paper about this that I can give to my students to read because I keep getting this question over and over again. So I wrote the papers. So the things that are under review or in press, especially if you have feedback on those things that you were confused by, I would appreciate that feedback. There's nothing that says those things are forever set in stone. So I do encourage you to read the things that are on the reading list. They are for your future reference as well, but all of them are relatively current things about what's going on in this world. And yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Attendance, strongly encouraged. I don't want to say required, but just strongly encouraged. If you're able to come, please come. It's more fun for all of us. The more folks who are here, the more lively a discussion that we can have. If you wanted to come on Zoom instead of in the room for whatever reason, that's still fine with me. If you're sick, please don't come in person. No, none of us wants to get sick. It's bad enough being cold as it is. Gonna still record everything on YouTube and host it there. I've got the YouTube playlist set up already. And if I happen to forget to record and it's something that you're going to need access to for homework or whatnot, I will re-record it. I forget occasionally. And then keep in mind you are allowed to ask questions in whatever format. If you're shy, you can put it in the chat window. You can raise your hand and talk, and the same goes for on Zoom. So whatever works for you works for me. And especially within the next 2 months or so, please on class days check your email. If there's a lot of snow on the ground or it's negative, it's positive now. It's all the way up to 2 right now. If it's so cold that the children are not allowed to go to school, then you're not allowed to come either. Like, that's my thinking. So I'm not going to make you come unless other people want to make you come. Plus, as a parent, you may not have other choices. You may not have a nice neighbor who's willing to take care of your children. So if I'm sick and if it's too dangerous outside, we're not meeting in person. We're going to meet on Zoom only. So I will not hesitate to pull that trigger. Okay. Questions or comments? See, when I get thirsty, that's a sign that it's time to pause and let y'all talk if you want to. No one wants to. But you're drinking your water too. That's good. That's good. All right, so software. We're starting in the same place. So to address the different needs of different degree programs, I know there's quite a few of you who love Stata. There's quite a few of you who use R. I'm still going to try and do both. I think I've provided SAS examples for my own use because that's usually what I do to make sure I know what the other programs are doing. What we did last semester, I'm going to start calling univariate software. Because like when you put in your information into Mixed or Elmer, there's one word that is the DV, right? It's a stacked data set. Like I might be predicting well-being, like in your last homework, and each row is well-being at a different occasion for a different person, but it's still well-being, for instance. Well, once we start getting into models that have time-varying predictors, like how does time-varying stress predict time-varying well-being, you have to designate one of those as the outcome. The problem is that if stress itself is something that contains individual differences and change, then you kind of need that to be a second outcome at the same time. And univariate software does not allow you to do that. So we're going to start there. I will show you what it can do, but it will quickly come to the point where we can't do stuff in it anymore. So Stata is what I'm featuring here. R is also possible. M plus, once we move into the multivariate stuff, is what I'm going to be using. So multivariate longitudinal in the sense of two different outcomes at a minimum that are each repeatedly measured over time. It turns out that multivariate software is what you need to optimally use those sorts of outcomes. So M plus is what I'm picking. The multivariate framework extends past traditional multi-level models. So in the multi-level SEM side of M+, you can still do everything you already know how to do. The only catch is that it does not have residual maximum likelihood or denominator degrees of freedom, so it's less optimal for samples of small persons. But the multivariate world includes both single-level structural equation models and multi-level structural equation models. So I call it multivariate longitudinal because the way that you set it up in software is a logically separate set of choices that depends on what else you're trying to do at the same time. Why not other SEM programs besides M+? There's 3 reasons. Lack of key features. So one of the things that M+ has is an option called T-scores, which in a structural equation model allows you to tell it when people were measured exactly. You don't have to have balanced time, in other words. We'll review that today. It also allows random slopes, both within traditional SEM and multi-level SEM, and it allows for lagged variable analysis, so like cross-lag panel model kinds of stuff, but amongst residuals done the proper way, and that uses Bayesian estimation, by the way. Pragmatism. I like to show the same types of models in multiple software when possible to give people choices, but at some point these models just get too big and too ugly, and it's too onerous to try to translate everything across different packages. Unfortunately, Lavaan as an SEM package in R does not have any of these capabilities. There's no random slopes, there's no t-scores, and that pretty much shuts it down for most longitudinal analyses. The only other R package I'm familiar with that does have those features is something called OpenMX, which is matrix based. It is a little challenging to use, but I do have on your resources 2 chapters from another textbook that uses OpenMX and some of their examples along with M+. So if that were something you wanted to pick up, you could do so. I tried to learn it once and got too frustrated and quit. So I can't help you much there. All right. So do I need to know SEM for this class was the next question I was anticipating, because there are some of you who have not yet taken that class. A lot of you have, but it's been a minute for a lot of you as well. That should come back in spring 26, but we're not 100% certain on that. So the transition from univariate longitudinal to multivariate requires some kind of SEM software or the multi-level version of it. Really, the difference is in data structure in that case. It's whether it's in wide or long format is the biggest difference there. If you're interested in measuring changes in latent variables as indicated by measurement models, that has to be some kind of SEM as well. And the translation, very simply, is that what we used to think about as boxes of item responses in a measurement model, these are the occasions instead. So that's the connection. If you haven't had SEM, at some point before March, it would be useful for you to go through a few limited parts of that class. So I went through all the slides and examples, and I pulled out this section here. So these are the things that I would recommend reviewing if you haven't had this before, or it's been so long that you're not sure you remember any of it. Also, last semester in example 5 and in lecture 5, I added the translation from traditional long format multi-level to wide format SEM, and I have both, I think, M+ and Lavaan code, if memory serves, in example 5 for that, so you can also look at those things. We're going to teach it in this semester as well, but it's helpful, I think, if you've seen it at least a little bit before. One caveat, though, in the SEM class, I spend a whole month on models for categorical item responses. We're not doing that in this class. If you understand those models and you want to use them in your project, go right ahead, though. I can certainly help with that. It's just there's an extra level of complexity that we're just not going to have time to go through. Okay, any other questions right now? Do you see why I made a PowerPoint? This is a lot to remember and not to keep rambling about. So here's the plan. Unit 1 is our review. So I put together a lecture slide deck that is essentially a best hits collection from last semester, greatest hits, so to speak. Because even if you're a one-hit wonder, somehow you can make a greatest hits album if you really want to. So that's unconditional models of change involving fixed and random effects related to time, as well as time invariant predictors. Then, in order of the syllabus, and I've changed it since the last time, by the way, I decided on a different order based on how things went. So this order better maps onto the textbook that I wrote, actually. I shouldn't have second guessed myself. Unit 2 is time varying predictors in univariate multi-level modeling and homework about that. So those of you who did the clustered multi-level modeling class will find this unit very, very familiar. It's about differentiating within effects from between effects, from contextual effects and smushed effects. All those words, concepts, and code still apply. We're just swapping out person for cluster. So that will be fairly straightforward, but this is for types of designs in which the predictors don't change, they only fluctuate. So the daily example that I've already forgotten who had it, but one of you had daily data. I think it was Sichi. I think that was right. Was that right? You had the daily data?
Yes.
Oh, yay for me, I remembered. So like if you're just watching, fluctuation in things like stress and health and mood and social support and all that kind of stuff, these models are probably going to be just fine for that. Related to that, a little bit tougher of a concept, but it actually is the same thing, is how you analyze change in what are known as accelerated longitudinal designs. So that is where I start with a group of third, fourth, and fifth graders, and I measure them each for 3 years. And so then children are both getting older, but some of them were older to start with. And you have to be able to differentiate what are between person effects of time, or grade in that case, from within person. It's exactly the same set of concerns as in any time varying predictor, because time is just a time varying predictor. The language gets a little trippy on that. So last time I did that first, regretted it. I think it will go better after we get the between within part sort of cemented in our heads a little bit. And this will also have a CAN-DATA homework to go with it. Then we get into the SEM sort of transition point. So from multi-level modeling to the equivalent ways of looking at that within SEM and multi-level SEM. So I'll show you how to translate directly across frameworks. I wrote a book chapter on exactly this for this reason, because it was a challenging thing for a lot of students last time, so I tried to make it less challenging. And then we'll have an example of how to model change in latent factors, making use of those more flexible routines within SEM. And then that prepares us to be able to look at time varying predictors that themselves change over time. So these have a lot of synonyms to them. They're known as multivariate growth models, parallel process models. What are the other ones? Latent curve models with structured residuals, random intercept and slope cross-leg panel models. Everyone has a different word for this. The idea is that you're building up to the point where you can have two growth curves operating simultaneously and have relationships among the intercepts, among the slopes, and then among the time-specific residuals, either at the same occasion or at different occasions if you're interested in lagged relationships. So that's where we're building to. Along the way, we'll look at multivariate models of within-person fluctuation, mediation in that case, and then also look at those extensions of growth models combined with cross-lag panel models and why to do things one way versus other ways. And then we have a bunch of student presentations, and then we'll see what we have time for after that. Last time I shoved in 3-level models by popular request because that was the thing folks wanted to hear the most from a list. If we have time left, and I may give you guys a list and let you pick from it. We'll see. And if we've ran out of our will to live by that point, it would just be good to stop and review and breathe. I'm fine with that too. I have this tendency to sort of just keep shoving everything in at the end of the semester, and even when I know that it's not necessarily going to work because I feel like I owe it to you. But maybe that's not the best idea in every case. We'll see when we get there. But again, the idea of having the student presentations first and then having probably 2 weeks, probably not 3 after that, is so that then you have time to do your peer reviews, get feedback from me, and decide if you want to revise the presentation, and that would be due at the end of finals week instead. Okay, that's my plan. That's the last slide. Any questions? Still feeling okay-ish?
I have a question, not
Please.
not necessarily like about this class, but
Anything's fair
since all
game.
the since all the examples include other forms of code, and I personally have been more comfortable in Stata and learning about it, but at what point do you recommend or would you suggest would be helpful to start trying to like learn R, let's say, just maybe not to do the most advanced things, but just like try to become a little bit more familiar, slash, is that something that would be useful to do in this context or maybe not in this class?
Okay, let me give you two different answers to those, or this part of it. For the models that we're doing in this class, learning Elmer instead of Stata Mixed is like a one-to-one. They do the same things. Actually, Stata Mixed has more choices because it has R matrix structures, whereas Elmer does not. You'd have to use the NLME, which then messes up the degrees of freedom. So from the univariate perspective, I think the only thing to be gained by learning R is to be able to put it on your CV and work with people who only know R. Like to be able to just, it's a more of a language translation thing. For the context of the multivariate stuff, I think that Stata's GSIM package can do a lot of what M Plus can do. I'm not 100% on it has all the options related to T-scores or things like that. One of my tasks on my to-do list is I wrote a chapter about the connections between MLM, SEM, and MSIM, and I made examples for it so far in SAS and M+. My list, though, is to finish that out and do them in every package that I know of, and Stata's GSIM is going to be one of them. So for that, I will have to figure this out within the next probably couple weeks or so, and I can give you a slightly better answer. So I think that if they have the features you need for your data, then staying in Stata or M plus would be fine, but I know you have access to Stata otherwise, which is a big difference, is fine. And that same thing goes for the rest of you. I'm software package agnostic to the point where the thing that you know, if it works for you, then use it. The problem is that like what I know, like Lavon really isn't good at these kind of models. It doesn't have the features that most people need. And they keep promising to add them and they haven't. And right now there's like a GoFundMe page for Lavon because the people who made it have like run out of money and time and patience. So I don't know what's going to happen to it, and they seem to be developing it in other ways that don't lend themselves to this. So short answer, yes, it's good to learn R to be able to talk to other people who use it. I don't think it has any features that will help you in this context. Any other software questions?
I don't have a software question, but I have a question.
Sure, go for it.
So before I take this class, some peers like mentioned that, like this class is hard. So and I saw the syllabus you gave me, and I feel like compared to the previous class, like this one has less units. So I wonder which unit maybe is the challenging one, like you think based on the previous experience. So I just kind of like have a mental prepare.
Yeah, so you're right. This class is hard. I mean, it is called advanced. There's only 5 units because I'm making room in class for presentations instead, which is something I don't normally do. But I think it's really important for you to start translating this and sort of taking the training wheels off, so to speak, and for you to experience presenting this stuff. To me, it depends. So I think the alternative metrics of time are probably that one and like unit 5, the second example, where is it? Multivariate change. I think those two tend to be the hardest.
Okay.
But it's hard hard for different reasons. The accelerated designs I think are easy in execution, difficult in interpretation. But then the multivariate change stuff I think is difficult in interpretation, but somewhat easy in execute. Like it's a little bit of both, because what ends up happening, the short answer for that, is that you can set up the exact same model in 2 different ways and get 2 different sets of answers. And you have to figure out like which ones they are. And when I first encountered this, I was so mad about it, I wrote a whole paper about it. And that's one of the papers on your reading list because I was like, why should I have to work this hard to figure this out? So like that I think is more challenging. But I would argue that you've already done the bulk of the work last semester in getting to this point. I have been told that the longitudinal class is the hardest one for folks because it has the most new terminology and notation and just all these concepts, and model for the variance is like a new thing that folks aren't used to thinking about. And relative to cluster data, there's a lot more nuance related to time. So I think you should not be scared. You should have been scared in August, but you're here now. And all of you are here now because you've self-selected to be here now, which means you're not that scared. So I think it will be okay.
Okay. We will see.
We will see. That's fair. That's all you can say. But I'm here to help. Your peers are here to help. I think we're all wanting the same thing for ourselves, right? We all want to get through this and have this help our research and make us better scholars. That's our goal. Okay, other questions or thoughts? All right, then we're done with this one.